At 2 in the morning, the Mercer estate felt like glass everywhere. Even my footsteps sounded borrowed, soft, and guilty on marble floors tonight. I pushed my cart slowly, letting the wheels whisper instead of squeal. Night shifts were my safest habit, because shadows hide names better here. In daylight, people ask questions, and questions grow teeth fast around me. I cleaned hallways no guests used, where silence carried a heartbeat alone. A grandfather clock ticked near the foyer, steady as a warning sign. Cold October air pressed against windows, making the curtains breathe faintly outside. I kept my head down, hair pinned tight, sleeves pulled low always. Nobody should notice a maid, especially one carrying secrets this late tonight. My left wrist throbbed under fabric, a bruise blooming quietly again there. I told myself it was clumsiness, a doorframe, a mistake nobody counted. That lie tasted familiar, like pennies, like sleep I never finished earning. At the east corridor shelf, I reached up to dust the top. The cloth slid, and my sleeve followed, exposing my skin to air. Dark pressure marks circled my wrist, finger-shaped shadows, not accidental ever. I snapped the sleeve down, heart hammering like it wanted escape too. Then the hallway changed, as if the house held its breath back. A key clicked somewhere, quiet, precise, and far too controlled for staff. I looked up and saw him near the foyer's amber sconce light. Dominic Mercer was taller than memory, built like calm authority made flesh. He wasn't dressed for bed, and he wasn't surprised to see me. His gaze moved from my cart to my hands with patience first. I felt pinned without touch, like a photo under glass suddenly displayed. People like him don't stare. They measure. They decide. They file away. My stomach tightened, and I reminded myself to breathe quietly through it. I kept my eyes on the floor, pretending I saw only dust. But I saw his shoes stop, and I knew he saw mine. His attention returned to my wrist, where the sleeve had slipped before. I braced for disgust, pity, and the judgment of careless eyes today. Instead, something colder flickered there, like recognition turning a lock inside him. His stare lifted to my face, and stopped at my eyebrow scar. It was a thin, pale line, easy to miss unless knowing me. I touched it without thinking, then dropped my hand like a thief. The last time someone looked at scar with meaning, I was 9. Back then, on South Chicago smelled like gasoline and corner store coffee always. I rode a bike too big, trying to keep up with boys. Dominic ran beside me, pretending he wasn't worried I'd fall again hard. A pothole caught my tire, and I went down in sparks fast. I hit the curb, split my eyebrow, and tasted blood and asphalt. I remember Dominic's face, pale with panic he tried hiding from me. I remember my own stubborn laugh, swearing I was fine anyway then. That scar became a bookmark in my life, proof of survival early. Now, in this mansion, Dominic stared like he'd found that page again. I wanted to ask why he was awake, why he cared tonight. But questions were risky, and I had survived by answering none ever. He took one step closer, and the air felt heavier between us. I smelled cedar and cold night, not cologne, something cleaner and sharper. His eyes dropped again to my wrist, then rose, steady and certain. I realized he wasn't deciding whether to help, only how and when. That certainty scared me more than anger would have from him. I forced my hands to keep moving, cloth circling wood quietly still. My cart squeaked once, and I froze, waiting for reprimand that never. Dominic didn't scold, didn't dismiss, didn't look away in discomfort at all. He watched like a man studying a wound on himself too long. Behind him, the clock kept counting, each tick a dare to speak. I didn't speak, because silence had saved me more times than truth. Still, My mind kept circling one thought, sharp as wire tonight here. If Dominic recognized me, then my hiding had already failed completely now. If he didn't, then why did he look devastated by sight? His jaw tightened, and I saw his throat work, restrained emotion held. Then his lips moved, barely, shaping something only my childhood knew still. I felt the nickname before I understood it, like a bruise inside. Nobody in Lake Forest should know that name I buried years ago. I swallowed hard, tasting that old penny fear, and kept cleaning anyway. My body wanted to run, but running had never been free once. It always cost sleep, money, pride, and pieces of myself at least. I pushed the cart toward the service hall, eyes lowered again quickly. Behind me, I felt Dominic's gaze follow like a shadow with weight. I reached the corner and turned, pretending the air was normal still. My wrists ached, my scar tingled, and my heart refused calm today. All I could think was that he'd seen me, fully at last. Invisibility had been my armor, and it was cracking in his house. If he knew my name, then Trent could learn it too soon. And if Dominic knew me, then my running might finally end differently. Morning came like an accusation. My feet still ached from marble floors, and my wrists felt louder than my thoughts. I washed my hands twice in the staff bathroom, staring at the pale line above my eyebrow like it had started glowing overnight. In the mirror, I looked like someone who had slept, but my body knew better. Daylight in a mansion is not gentle. It is bright, clean, and full of angles where people can see you. At night, I can be a shadow. In morning sun, shadows get counted, and I never learned how to survive being counted. Mrs. Baird posted the new roster near the service kitchen door, clipped straight as a sermon. I did not mean to look, but survival makes your eyes greedy. My name, Maya Hart, sat beside day shift hours, and the words light duty only. No overnights, no stairs, no heavy carts. Anyone else would have felt lucky. I felt exposed. Light duty meant people would notice I was pregnant, notice I moved carefully, notice I existed at all. I traced the ink with my gaze, wondering who had touched the schedule for me, and why before I could vanish into routine. Harper was not here to see any of it. She was with Mrs. Linton from the little church on Oak Street, the woman who smelled like cinnamon gum and always carried extra juice boxes. I had told Harper it was a sleepover, and she had believed me because she is 4 and still thinks adults are honest when they smile. Her backpack stayed in my locker, and the one with the faded unicorn patch and a crushed pouch of applesauce inside. I replayed her last voicemail in my head, afraid Trent could find her through one careless signature or a routine. The estate looked different in daylight, too polished to trust. Sun poured through tall windows and turned every surface into a mirror. Staff moved in predictable lines, shoes quiet, faces blank, everyone pretending we did not notice each other's panic. In the kitchen, someone laughed at a joke I could not hear, and the sound made my shoulders jump anyway. I kept my sleeves down and my smile small. Why would a man like Dominic Mercer care who cleaned his hallway? What did he want from someone like me, besides silence? I had spent years perfecting silence as my shield. By late morning, I was sent to the laundry corridor, or where heat and detergent made the air thick. Darla Pike waited there like she owned the narrow hallway. She did not raise her voice. She did not have to. Her eyes went straight to my belly, then to my wrists, as if she could read bruises through fabric. She made it clear that light duty was not kindness. It was a test, and failing meant being replaced. She spoke in policy words, but her meaning was personal. I nodded, kept my face still, and hated how small I felt today. Shame is a trick. It makes you think you deserve the corner you are standing in. I swallowed it anyway, because hunger, pregnancy, and fear have a way of bargaining together. Trent used to love corners. He would stand in a doorway and ask questions that were not questions, then act wounded when I answered wrong. Darla was smaller than him, safer than him, but the pattern felt the same. I reminded myself that I had escaped once. I could do it again if I had to. The thought should have comforted me. It did not. Not with 2 kids. A few minutes later, the corridor cooled, not from air conditioning but from presence. Dominic appeared at the service door as if the house had summoned him, and Darla's posture changed before I even looked up. He did not touch her, did not threaten, did not perform anger. He simply watched, then shifted his attention to the clipboard on the wall like he was reading the truth off paper. Darla's certainty cracked. She stepped back, smoothing her uniform, suddenly busy elsewhere. By lunch, her name was gone from our wing. The speed of it felt unreal, like time had skipped. After that, people watched me differently. Not openly, not kindly, but with the cautious curiosity staff reserve for trouble. Doors that used to stay propped were closed. The East Gate guard changed shifts twice while I carried towels past the window. Mrs. Baird asked nothing, yet my tasks grew lighter, my breaks longer, my path through the house strangely clear. Relief landed in my chest, then fear followed it, because protection always comes with a receipt. I kept wondering if Dominic expected gratitude, obedience, or something worse. Maybe he expected nothing. That possibility felt the most dangerous of all now. By mid-afternoon, my body was running on coffee and nerves. I checked my phone in the linen closet, even though it barely held service, just to see Harper's face in the last photo I had saved. Her cheeks were sticky with grape jelly and trust, and I promised myself I would not let Trent touch that trust again. Then Mrs. Baird handed me a cloth and pointed me toward the library for 4 in the afternoon, as if it was a normal task. My stomach tightened. Dominic was not done with me. I could feel the house steering me toward him. At 4 in the afternoon, the house felt too awake. Sunlight slid through the tall windows and made every dust mote look guilty. Mrs. Baird sent me to the East Wing library with a cloth and a spray bottle, like it was any other assignment. My legs were tired, my wrists still tender under my sleeves, and my stomach tight with the memory of being watched. The library door was heavy, warm wood under my palm. When it opened, the air smelled of paper, smoke, and calm. A low fire glowed, and the room held secrets the mansion avoided quietly. Dominic Mercer was already inside, seated near the window in a leather chair, a file open on his lap like a prop. He did not look up right away, but I felt his attention all the same, like pressure on the back of my neck. Why was he here now, in daylight, in the one room that felt human? Why did he want me alone, where there were no hallways to disappear into? I kept my gaze on the shelves and walked the edges, counting steps to the door. My cart stayed outside, so I could leave fast if needed. The library was different from the rest of the estate, softer in its power. Books climbed the walls to the ceiling, spines worn, titles used, not just displayed. A Persian rug muted my footsteps, and the fire made the air warm enough that my skin almost forgot winter existed. I dusted one shelf, then another, I moving slowly so my breath would not shake. I kept my body angled sideways, one shoulder toward Dominic, one toward the door, the way I learned to stand in cramped apartments. Being seen from behind meant being trapped, and I refused to be trapped again. His gaze followed my hands. Each time I reached up, I felt him notice how I braced my left palm against the wood, protecting my balance and my belly. Each time I swallowed, I felt him notice the pause before it, the way fear lived in my throat. I told myself it was imagination, that rich men watched staff the way they watched clocks. Then I saw his eyes flick to my eyebrow scar again, and something in his face tightened, not with disgust, but with memory. The room went quieter, and the fire waited for what came next, too. South Chicago came back in a flash of neon and exhaust. The corner store on Homan sold cheap candy and hotter coffee than it should have. I was 9, riding a blue bike with a loose chain, trying to prove I belonged on that street. Dominic ran beside me, too serious for a kid, watching the sidewalk like it was a battlefield. My front wheel hit a crack, my body flew, and my head met the curb. Blood warmed my eyebrow, and I laughed anyway, stubborn and shaking. Dominic's hands hovered, afraid to touch, afraid to lose me right there. Back in the library, I wiped a row of books I could not afford to read. Dominic shifted in his chair, and I felt the movement like a door unlocking. He glanced toward the window, toward the garden beyond it, and then back to my hands, as if comparing the woman I was to the girl I had been. Something small gave him away, a detail from the old block that no stranger could carry. It was not a sentence I heard, but a shape of words in his mouth, and my childhood nickname hanging in the silence between us. I remembered how Darla vanished from my day like smoke, and I understood it had been his decision. Dominic did not protect with speeches. He protected by rearranging reality. My skin prickled as I realized he had likely read my paperwork, my agency file, my clipped answers, my too careful fake name. He watched the way I kept one hand near my belly and the other near escape. Men like Trent hunted with questions. Men like Dominic hunted with patience. If Dominic was hunting, what exactly was he trying to find? And why did it feel like me right now? I lowered my eyes and kept dusting, pretending routine could save me. My heart kept asking the same terrible question. Was this kindness or ownership forming in quiet? I had run from ownership for years, from rules disguised as love. Dominic's stillness was not Trent's chaos, but it was still power, and power always demanded something. I felt my throat tighten around Trent's name, unspoken but heavy. The bruise on my wrist pulsed under fabric like a warning bell. If I told the truth, would Dominic use it to help or to control? Either way, silence was ending very soon. I finished the shelf and set the cloth down with hands that would not steady. Dominic did not block my path, yet I felt boxed in by what he knew. The library, warm and safe adjacent, had become a trap made of recognition. I walked to the door, back straight, breathing measured, as if I could carry my secret out like a bag of laundry. In the hallway, brighter and louder, I heard staff moving, and I realized the house had shifted. Dominic had seen through my disguise, and now I had to choose, confess Trent, or lose my story. Leaving the library, I kept my shoulders back like posture could hide panic. The hallway felt brighter than it should, and my throat stayed tight, as if the name Dominic almost formed had lodged there. I pushed my cleaning cart again, pretending the wheels mattered more than his eyes. My hands shook when I reached for the spray bottle, so I moved slower, breathing through my nose, counting silently. The bruise under my sleeve pulsed with heat, and my belly felt suddenly heavy. I told myself I was fine, just tired, just pregnant, just clumsy and not worth anyone's attention. In my head, I rehearsed the stories I always used. Bruises from a doorway, fear from hormones, a new start that was nobody's business. Those stories had kept me alive, but they were also a cage I carried everywhere. Why was it harder to accept help than to keep running? Maybe because help meant being seen, and being seen meant being found. I watched other staff glance at me, then away, like my pregnancy was contagious. I could feel Dominic's decision in the air, invisible and absolute. I hated needing it, and I hated wanting more than I admitted. Trent had started as the kind of man who remembered my coffee order and called Harper his little buddy. Slowly, he rewrote the rules of my life. He wanted my location on at all times, then wanted my phone on the counter at night, screen up so he could scroll while I pretended to sleep. If I flinched, he said I was hiding something. If I cried, he said I was dramatic. After every explosion came a soft apology and a promise to change, and I learned to live in that gap, grateful for calm, terrified of the next question. He isolated me without locking a door. Friends became bad influences. My job became suspicious. My money became a shared account I needed permission to touch. He checked receipts like they were confessions, and he turned my silence into proof. I told myself it was normal because normal was cheaper than starting over. How many times did I call it normal just to survive the day? When I got pregnant again, the fear turned physical. I pictured Harper watching me accept that life, learning it was love. That picture finally pushed me to run, even with nowhere ready for us. I did not say Trent's name out loud in the corridor, but I felt it in my mouth like smoke. And Dominic didn't press with questions. His stillness was the pressure. He listened the way powerful men listen when they are deciding what becomes possible. A few minutes later, Mrs. Baird appeared beside me with a small envelope, crisp and sealed. Inside was an appointment card for an obstetrician in Chicago, scheduled for this week, early morning, discreet entrance, no waiting room. I felt anger at being managed, relief at being cared for, and fear of what his attention might cost. Before I could argue, Mrs. Baird laid out the second piece, as gently as someone setting down glass. She had spoken with Mrs. Linton at church, verified Harper's stay, and confirmed my consent through the same number I used to check in each night. A car would bring Harper here tomorrow, with Mrs. Linton accompanying her, paperwork copied, IDs checked, and no surprises. Harper's stuffed bunny, the one with the missing ear, would come too, tucked into her backpack. Relief hit me so hard my knees softened. I hated that I needed rescue, and I hated that it felt like oxygen. When I finally reached my room, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my hands like they belonged to someone else. Receiving help felt like stepping onto ice I couldn't test first. Trent used gifts to tighten chains, and my body expected the same outcome. But Dominic's help came with boundaries that protected my choices, not erased them. No one demanded gratitude. No one asked for payment. The estate simply adjusted around me. Longer breaks, fewer staircases, staff instructed to give space. Hope crept in anyway, unwelcome, because hope makes you careless if you're not careful. That evening I noticed new faces at the gate and a camera being tested in the corridor outside my door. Not obvious, not dramatic, just quietly added, like stitches closing a wound. Dominic was building a perimeter around my life, and I could feel the shape of it even without seeing him. Part of me wanted to protest, to insist I could handle my own mess. Another part remembered sleeping in my car and counting quarters for gas. Trent would not let go because he never released what he considered his. If Dominic moved pieces fast, Trent would move too. I held the appointment card between my fingers until the edges warmed, like proof I wasn't imagining support. I pictured Harper stepping into this big house with her bunny and her stubborn little stride, and my chest loosened in a way I didn't trust. Safety should not feel like a drug, but it did. I lay back and listened to the quiet, waiting for it to turn on me, because quiet always did before. Somewhere down the hall, a door clicked and voices lowered. The estate was adjusting. Outside, people were searching. I understood the storm was moving toward us. Harper's bunny sat on my nightstand like proof that tomorrow could be real. Mrs. Baird had already confirmed the ride from Oak Street Church, and the appointment card rested under the lamp, neat and official. For a few hours, I let myself believe the walls of this estate could hold. I ate soup without rushing. I watched the garden through glass and almost forgot to scan for cars. Then a new guard appeared at the east gate, and a camera lens turned slightly toward the driveway. Peace here was never still. It was scheduled. And I was not scheduling it. Late morning, Reese arrived without ceremony. The kind of man who looked harmless until you noticed how little he blinked. He spoke to Dominic in the study, and I heard only fragments through the cracked door, enough to make my skin go cold. Trent had crossed into Illinois. He was calling staffing agencies, cleaning services, even hotel temp lines, repeating my description until someone would listen. He was widening his search the way a drowning person thrashes, grabbing anything. I felt the old panic rise, sharp and familiar, because distance had stopped protecting me. It was already inside my place. Dominic did not react like a man surprised. He reacted like a man confirming what he expected. By noon, the estate felt tighter. 2 plainclothes men rotated near the service corridor, pretending to check vents and locks. Mrs. Our Baird changed the staff entrances, so deliveries came through one door only, logged and watched. A list appeared at the kitchen phone, numbers to report anything strange, even a car idling too long. I noticed my own routines changing as well. I stopped taking the shortest path. I took the safest path, every time, because my body no longer trusted luck alone. The scariest part was not Trent's rage. It was the way systems could betray you quietly. Reese traced calls back to the agency that placed me here, and I understood what that meant. Paperwork, screens, someone clicking through files. A receptionist could be tired, curious, or broke. A supervisor could accept a bribe and call it a favor. Even without names, patterns give people handles. I had left town, changed phone numbers, stopped using social media, but my work history still existed in databases that did not care about fear. They cared about entries. Trent loved handles he could grab. Anger came next, hot and useless. I was angry at Trent for chasing, angry at myself for ever thinking love could be trained, angry at the world for asking victims to be invisible and grateful. I sat on the edge of my bed and pressed my palm to my belly, feeling the baby shift like a reminder that my choices were no longer only mine. Harper's face flashed in my mind, jelly smile and missing ear bunny, and shame tried to take the wheel again. I refused it. I had run to protect them, and I would keep protecting them. Reese moved like a metronome, collecting facts, checking motel lots, scanning camera feeds from places most people forgot existed. Dominic listened with his hands still, eyes steady, as if fear was something he stored away until it was useful. He ordered more coverage on the property, more eyes on roads leading in, and a tighter rule about who could approach staff. I noticed how he never said my name in the busy rooms. He treated my identity like a fragile thing, kept under glass. That discretion felt like respect, and it also reminded me how easily my life could shatter. By evening, whispers traveled through the service hall. Not about me exactly, but about change. Darla's absence had taught everyone that rules here could flip in a day. Now new rules arrived quietly. Badges checked twice, phones kept away from windows, staff told to vary routes to their cars. I heard Mrs. Baird remind a cook not to mention schedules outside, as if schedules were ammunition. I began to understand that protection was not a blanket. It was a machine, and I was inside it. If it failed, the blast would hit everyone nearby, not just me and my children. Near midnight, Reese returned with his phone held low, as if the screen could bite. Dominic read, and his face stayed calm, but the air cooled. Reese had pulled voicemails from the agency line. Trent had been calling repeatedly, leaving messages that started polite, then turned urgent, then turned sharp. The detail that stopped my breath was not the tone. It was the name. Not Maya Hart. My real legal name, the one I erased from forms and prayers. Even hearing it secondhand felt like a hand closing. It meant he had an anchor again, and anchors always pull back. I went to my room and sat with the appointment card, thumb rubbing the printed date. Outside my window, security lights swept the lawn in slow arcs. Inside, my thoughts raced anyway. If Trent could find my name, could he find Harper next? Could he trace the church or the agency? The net was tightening, and the instinct in me screamed to run again. But running while pregnant, while raising a child, had already cost too much. I stared at the ceiling and realized I needed a new skill. Not disappearing. Living inside protection without letting fear drive me today. By morning, the estate felt narrower, like the walls had leaned in overnight. New faces rotated at the gates, and every staff door clicked with a coded lock. I kept hearing my real name in my head, the one Trent had used in those voicemails, and it made my stomach twist. Dominic didn't chase me with questions. He simply made space around me, clearing hallways, limiting who could approach. Safety looked like procedure here, not promises. Still, I woke up scanning windows, listening for engines, wondering how close Trent really was, and whether my calm was borrowed or finally earned. Dominic's people walked me through routines without making them feel like punishment. They showed me which entrances stayed open, which cameras covered the driveway, and what to do if a strange car lingered. Dominic listened while I repeated it back. Like math, I had to learn to survive. If I left a room, I noted exits. If Harper needed air, we used the inner garden. If my phone rang from an unknown number, I didn't answer. Why does safety feel like a debt, even when nobody demands payment? I hated that gratitude arrived with fear, and I couldn't separate them. Harper arrived after lunch, holding Mrs. Linton's hand and clutching her bunny by the missing ear. She stepped into the foyer like it was a museum and immediately asked where the snacks lived. I wanted to cry from relief, but I swallowed it, because crying in front of Harper makes her think she has to fix me. Dominic stayed back, giving her space, yet I saw him soften when she waved at him like he was a tall piece of furniture. She tested the new rules by running, then looked back to see if we'd chase, and I promised myself. That night, after Harper fell asleep in the guest suite, I listened to the estate's sounds like a translator. The gate beeped once, the security radio hissed, and my heart jumped anyway. I made peanut butter toast for Harper's breakfast because she insists it tastes like home, even in strange places. My nervous system unclenched in small increments, then snapped back when a door shut too hard downstairs. Dominic never apologized for the noise. He just adjusted it, instructing staff to move quieter near our rooms. Consistency was his love language, even if he never called it that out loud. In the evenings, we ended up in the library again, not as confrontation, but refuge. Harper sat on the rug with crayons, drawing a house and a bunny, while I rocked my belly in the chair. Dominic read quietly, turning pages like he trusted books more than people. When the fire popped, Harper giggled, and I saw the boy I knew hiding behind the man. I remembered the corner store, the bike crash, and him stepping between me and older kids with fists clenched. The warmth lasted seconds, then fear returned, because remembering meant he could find what I'd buried. Over the next days, I noticed Dominic's work changing. Meetings happened earlier, with fewer voices and more folders stamped with company logos. Men who used to wear black suits started carrying tablets and talking about audits. Dominic kept his temper sheathed, correcting people with a look instead of a threat. I saw him sign documents that looked like leases, not weapons. Mrs. Baird mentioned a charity dinner and a compliance consultant, words I'd never heard near his name. It felt like he was building a second life beside the first, deciding which one deserved to survive for the children watching. It hit me one evening when Dominic watched Harper feed crumbs to the fire's edge like it was a pet. His expression wasn't soft exactly, but it was careful, like he was handling something breakable inside himself. I realized my return wasn't pulling him back into violence. It was forcing him to confront what his power did to innocent people. He had been preparing to step away, and now he had a reason that wasn't ego. That realization scared me. If I mattered enough to change his direction, then I mattered enough to be used against him, too, someday soon. The appointment day approached like a deadline. Mrs. Baird laid out a simple plan. Leave at dawn, return before the neighborhood stirred, use a private entrance, keep Harper at the estate with a sitter she trusted. Dominic's team checked the car twice and changed plates in a way that made me uneasy. Not because it was wrong, but because it proved how real the threat was. I practiced walking slowly, breathing through nerves, keeping my face neutral. Outside the gates, there would be parking lots, elevators, strangers, cameras. A single glance could become a story Trent could chase all over. That night, I tucked Harper in and listened to her tiny breathing settle into sleep. She asked why the men outside wore earpieces, and I told her they were helpers, because 4-year-olds deserve simple truths. When she drifted off, I sat in the dark and let my fear have a minute. Then I took it back. Dominic's protection wasn't a cage unless I made it one. I could learn the rules and still choose my life inside them. But tomorrow I would leave the perimeter, and the world would see me. What happens when hiding isn't an option anymore today? At 7:15 in the morning, the Mercer gates opened like a mouth I didn't trust. The guard's nod was polite, but my body still flinched at sunlight. Outside the estate, everything was open. Sidewalks, gas stations, on faces behind windshields. I sat in the back seat, hands folded over my belly, trying to look like any pregnant woman headed to an appointment. How do you act normal when your body is screaming? Trees flashed by, then storefronts, then the gray stretch of highway. The farther we drove, the thinner my breath felt, as if world read fear off my skin. Dominic sat up front beside the driver, shoulders loose, eyes moving in small checks. 2 cars followed, far enough to look accidental, close enough to matter. I watched reflections in the side window, measuring distance between us and anyone behind. Every turn felt planned, every stoplight a test. Dominic didn't touch me, didn't soothe, just kept the rhythm steady, like he'd done this 1,000 times. The clinic entrance we approached wasn't the main one, on more like a side passage for private patients. That should have comforted me. Instead, it made me wonder who else watched and what they wanted. The parking garage smelled of damp concrete and disinfectant, bright with fluorescent glare. My nausea returned, sharp and sour, as we rolled past painted arrows. I told myself it was pregnancy, not fear, until I saw him. Not a clear face, just a posture near the elevators. Feet planted wide, head turning too fast, scanning like hunger. The way he held his shoulders, impatient and entitled, yanked me back into years of rules. My fingers went cold. The baby kicked once, hard, as if warning me. I kept my eyes down, but my body screamed his name anyway right then. I didn't point. I didn't gasp. I just froze in the seat, breathing shallow, counting tiles. Because panic is loud even when silent. Dominic's head turned a fraction, like he'd felt the change in me. His hand lifted, not toward me, but toward the dashboard, a small signal. The driver eased past the elevator bank without stopping. We circled once, then again, as if looking for a lost space. My heartbeat thudded in my ears. If he's this close, how long until he's at the gate? I watched the figure shift, phone raised, and my throat tightened around my life. A second car slid into view ahead of us, identical paint, identical calm. It took the ramp toward the clinic level while our driver turned down into the garage. Dominic's team moved like chess pieces, doors opening, closing, never hurried. We stopped beside a service stairwell with a plain sign, the kind nobody photographs. A guard stepped out first, scanning corners, then waved us forward with one steady palm. I kept my face blank, one hand on my belly, the other gripping my coat pocket. We climbed, not to the lobby, but to a back corridor that smelled of bleach. Inside the clinic corridor, my appointment felt like a secret shared by too many people. A badge flashed, A door opened, and I tried to focus on the baby's heartbeat instead of the world's. Still, I noticed a man in a tailored coat near the vending machines, not looking at anyone, yet tracking everything. He lifted a phone, typed, and glanced toward our hallway as if counting seconds. In the garage below, a car idled in a corner, driver unseen. Our reroute had left fingerprints. Someone besides Trent was studying Dominic's patterns, and I had become part of that count. We were back in the car before I could settle, my body still buzzing. Reese's update reached Dominic while we merged onto the road, and I read the meaning in the way Dominic's jaw locked, then relaxed. Trent was here, not just in Illinois, but in this part of the city, moving with an associate who asked questions for him. At the same time, Reese had noticed unfamiliar eyes near the medical district, a second thread tightening around Dominic. I had thought I was the weakness in our story. Now I understood I was a doorway, and predators love doorways. The ride back felt longer. My hands wouldn't warm, and I kept tasting metal on my tongue. Dominic's calm never cracked, yet I felt the effort behind it, like he was holding two wars at once. I pictured Harper in the guest suite with her bunny and a cup of apple juice, safe for now, and that thought kept me from unraveling. Still, my body carried the parking garage inside it. Every bump in the road sent a tight pull through my abdomen. I told myself it was nerves, but the baby moved restlessly, and my breath shortened without permission. When the gates closed behind us, the estate didn't feel like victory. It felt like a pause still. Dominic kept his pace measured, as if speed could be tracked. Staff faces appeared, then disappeared, pretending nothing happened. In my room, I sat on the bed and pressed my palm to my belly, willing my muscles to loosen. The baby kicked, impatient. My abdomen tightened, eased, then tightened again. I tried to breathe through it, but my breath stayed shallow. I stared at the appointment card and realized my body had carried fear home. What happens if fear turns physical tonight? At 4:10 in the morning, I woke to a twisting pain that didn't belong to ordinary pregnancy. For a second, I waited for it to fade, holding my breath, listening to the estate's quiet, counting the spaces between the grandfather clock's ticks. It came again, sharper, deeper, and my stomach tightened like a fist. How do you tell fear apart from instinct when your body is screaming? I pressed my palm to my belly, felt the baby shift, and tried the breathing Dr. Samira had shown me at my last check. The rhythm helped for one heartbeat, then broke. Sweat cooled on my neck. My hands shook so badly I dropped my phone onto the quilt, then fumbled it back up. Harper's door stayed closed across the hall, her bunny tucked under her chin, unaware. I knew I could not handle this alone. Not tonight. Not with my baby. I called Dominic with a thumb that barely worked, and sent my location through the emergency contact Mrs. Baird insisted I memorize. I expected questions, hesitation, the slow drag of disbelief. Instead, footsteps arrived fast, controlled, and quiet. Dominic filled the doorway in a dark sweater, hair uncombed, eyes already awake. Behind him, one guard moved down the hall while another appeared near Harper's room, protecting the innocent parts of my life. Dominic didn't touch my belly at first. He watched my face, then my breathing, then the way my knees trembled. He signaled once, and the house shifted into motion. A car engine turned over outside. A coat was draped around my shoulders. Someone placed a small bag in my hand, already packed with paperwork and a baby blanket. The pain surged and I folded forward. Dominic stayed close, he's steady as a railing while the world outside waited patiently. The ride into the city blurred into streetlights and empty lanes. I sat in the back seat, seatbelt cutting across my belly the way safety always did, tight and necessary. Each contraction made my vision narrow, and I focused on counting breaths, 4 in, 6 out, like climbing stairs one step at a time. Dominic sat beside me, angled toward the window, scanning mirrors, but his hand hovered near mine without claiming it. When the pain peaked, he described something ordinary, a memory from our block, the corner store awning flapping in summer wind, the sound of my bike chains snapping. Hearing those small details kept me anchored to a version of myself that existed before Trent. I could smell leather and cold air, hear the tires whisper, and feel Dominic's calm traveling through the space like a steady current. The hospital sign appeared and I started shaking harder still. Inside, everything moved fast under bright lights. Nurses guided me through badge-locked doors. An antiseptic burned the back of my throat. The blood pressure cuff squeezed my arm until my fingers tingled, then squeezed again, and I saw their faces sharpen. Dr. Samira Qureshi met us near a curtained bay, calm as a lighthouse, eyes clear above her mask. She checked monitors, asked questions I answered with nods and broken breaths, and directed the team with measured certainty. I understood enough to hear the worry. My pressure was dangerously high, stress and exhaustion stacking like bricks. They started an IV, drew blood, and shifted me onto a rolling bed. Dominic stayed at the wall, close enough that I could find him, far enough to let me stay myself. I kept thinking of Harper asleep, of Trent hunting, and of my body choosing this moment before I was ready to face. Labor made time strange. Minutes stretched, then vanished, swallowed by waves I could not predict. I gripped the sheet, breathed, listened to Dr. Samira's steady guidance, and tried to stay present for my baby. Dominic was my fixed point. Whenever my eyes darted, he was still there, a dark shape against the pale wall, refusing to look away. I thought of Harper's laugh in the library, of peanut butter toast, of the missing ear bunny, and told myself this child deserved a safer start than fear. When the final push came, my whole body shook with effort and panic. Then the room filled with a thin, startled cry. The sound was so small it cracked something open in me. Tears slid into my hair, not from pain, but from release. A nurse placed my baby against my chest, warm and real, and for one breath I forgot everything chasing us. Afterward, exhaustion settled on me like heavy wool. The room quieted to beeps and footsteps, and I watched my baby's mouth search for comfort. Dominic stood near the window, shoulders squared, as if he could hold the city back. I wanted to ask what came next, but words felt too expensive. Dr. Samira checked my pressure again, spoke to the nurses, and the urgency eased into cautious relief. Then Dominic's phone vibrated. He glanced down once and the calm in his face sharpened into purpose. I didn't see the message, but I felt it in the way his body went still. Reese had found an opening. Trent had grabbed the wrong woman at a transit stop, witnesses called police, and a report existed with names and timestamps. Consequences, finally, in ink. Dominic didn't celebrate. He nodded, like a lock turning, and I understood the hunt was about to end. The hours after birth felt like floating between bright lights and deep water. My daughter slept in a clear bassinet beside me, her tiny breaths syncing with the monitor beeps. Dominic stood near the window, phone in hand, as if he could hold the city back. What does safety even mean when your body is still shaking? I watched his face tighten for a second, then settle into that calm he wears like armor. I knew Reese's message had changed something. Not a threat, but an opening. And openings are dangerous because they invite decisions. I was too tired to decide. By late morning, Janine Whitaker arrived in a charcoal coat, carrying a slim laptop and a paper folder. She didn't look impressed by money or frightened by reputation. She looked focused. Dominic met her outside my room, then stepped in only long enough to check my eyes and the baby. No speeches, no vows, just action. Janine spread documents on the visitor chair and started building a timeline. Reese sent audio files, screenshots, and addresses, Dominic nodded once, approving the process like a contract. I realized he wasn't choosing revenge. He was choosing consequence. That felt rarer. That felt safer. The evidence came in layers, each one colder than the last. There were the agency voicemails, his voice shifting from pleading to demanding in the span of minutes. There were call logs showing repetition. The same numbers hit again and again until someone answered. Reese had pulled a harassment trail from landlords and employers, plus the motel address where Trent had been staying. Then the transit stop report arrived, with witness names and a timestamp. Janine added records of prior protection orders withdrawn under pressure. Patterns, not rumors. Paper that could hold him. For once, the system had something to hold. Writing my statement while my body still trembled felt like lifting a weight with stitches in my skin. Janine asked for facts, but what I had were patterns of fear. I described how Trent turned love into monitoring, how he needed my phone on the counter at night, screen up, so he could scroll. I described the apologies that reset the trap, the rules about where I could go, the way money became permission. Why does telling the truth feel like stepping into traffic? Because once it's spoken, it can't be swallowed again. I signed it, for Harper, and baby. Janine moved like a surgeon, trimming emotion into usable lines. She compiled the voicemails, the transit stop report, the witness names, and my statement into one packet. Dominic's team added maps, call logs, and the motel address. But Janine kept it clean, fit for a courtroom, not a back alley. Dominic signed an emergency protective order request without hesitation, then authorized Janine to meet the prosecutor that afternoon. Watching him choose law over brute force felt like watching someone rewrite a family curse. He didn't want Trent hurt. He wanted Trent stopped. And he wanted it done today, before Trent adapted. The system moved faster than I expected, which almost made me distrust it. By late afternoon, Janine's phone buzzed, and Dominic's posture shifted toward relief. A judge signed the warrant based on the assault report, the harassment trail, and the pattern of prior orders. Trent was arrested at a motel parking lot before sunset. I pictured handcuffs and felt no joy, only a sudden emptiness. My breath finally reached the bottom of my lungs, then shook on the way out. Relief arrived like disbelief wearing a thin mask. I held my baby and cried into her blanket. Dominic just stayed. Even from custody, Trent tried to reach through the bars. A message came through a third party to the agency, full of phrases about fatherhood and rights, as if biology could erase terror. It was the same tactic, a new costume for control. Janine treated it like evidence, not a negotiation. She filed for stricter no-contact boundaries and clear distance rules, and Dominic made sure every staff member knew the protocol if Trent tried to send anything again. No phone calls, no surprise visits, no loopholes disguised as concern. I watched the process close around him like a door locking. That night, with Trent in custody, I expected my muscles to unclench like a spring released. Instead, I lay awake in the hospital room, listening for footsteps that were only nurses. Fear didn't vanish. It rearranged itself. It became a reflex to check my phone, a jolt when the elevator chimed, a worry that Harper would wake asking where I was. Dominic sat in the corner chair with coffee he barely touched, keeping watch as if quiet could still be guarded. My baby slept. Her fingers curled like commas in a sentence I was learning to finish. I could rest. In the morning, Dr. Samira cleared me to leave within days, but my mind stayed stuck in alarms. Mrs. Baird brought Harper to visit, and she climbed onto the bed, handing me the missing ear bunny like it could fix everything. I watched Dominic arrange discharge details, security rotations, and follow-up appointments with the same calm he used in war rooms. The threat was contained, yet my body still anticipated impact. I understood the next battle wasn't Trent. It was rebuilding routines, trust, and ordinary mornings. Safety had opened the door to healing. Now I have to learn how to live. Back at the estate, the quiet felt different. Not empty, not predatory, just unfamiliar. What do you do with your hands when you're not bracing for impact? I kept catching myself holding my breath when a door clicked, and then realizing nothing followed. My body still woke at dawn, expecting footsteps outside my room, but the only sound was the soft whir of the heater, and my baby's tiny sighs. Mrs. Baird set a tray of oatmeal and fruit at my door every morning. The same calm knock. The same respectful distance. Like routine was medicine, and she refused to miss a dose. Healing wasn't a straight line. Some afternoons I could walk the garden path with the stroller and feel almost normal. And then a security radio would hiss and my shoulders would jump up to my ears. It loosened in inches. I learned to come back faster. Inhale, exhale, name 3 safe things I could see. The crib rails in my room. Harper's bunny on the dresser. The locked gate light glowing outside. The nursery appeared the way snow covers a yard, quietly and all at once. On one morning, a small crib sat beside the window, a changing pad folded neatly on a dresser, and a rocking chair angled toward the firelight like it had always belonged. Diapers, wipes, onesies stacked by size. When I asked Mrs. Baird with my eyes, she gave me that look that meant the house had plenty of storage, and we would not discuss miracles. I didn't trust tenderness yet, but I sat in that chair and let my baby sleep on my chest. Harper made the estate feel less like a fortress and more like a strange hotel with rules. She demanded cereal in a specific bowl, insisted the bunny needed its own blanket, and treated the long hallway like a racetrack until a guard gently redirected her. She started calling Dominic the serious man in her head, the way kids label things they don't understand. She didn't fear him. She studied him. She watched whether he showed up, whether he kept promises made with actions, and she decided trust was earned by repetition, not gifts. Dominic stayed in the background on purpose. He never hovered while I fed the baby, never tried to take over decisions, never asked for gratitude as payment. He removed obstacles the way he removed Darla from my day, clean and quiet. A pediatrician appointment appeared on my calendar. A lactation consultant's number sat on the bedside table. My work duties vanished without drama so I could heal. When I cooked eggs at midnight because hormones made me hungry, nobody scolded. The kitchen just existed for me, like I had a right to be human. As my body strengthened, my mind started reaching for the future like a hand in the dark. I had always been good with numbers. I'm the kind of good that made teachers call me practical, like it was a flaw. I pulled up community college programs on a borrowed tablet and found an accounting certificate that fit my life. Part-time classes, night options, childcare resources. Hope arrived again, sharp and risky, because hope makes you plan, and planning makes you visible. Still, I wanted a life built on more than running. Dominic offered support the way he offered everything. Precise, quiet, no strings spoken. I refused to let it turn into a story where I owed him my freedom. So I wrote a loan agreement in my notebook, then typed it up, complete with a repayment schedule, a start date, and a line that made me laugh at myself. Tuition assistance, $5,000. Paid back over time, no commas, no excuses. Mrs. Baird printed it without comment. Dominic read it carefully. I then signed, and the lack of ego in that moment steadied something inside me. We built a routine out of ordinary pieces. Mornings were diapers, oatmeal, Harper's cartoons low, and sunlight on the rug. Afternoons were naps, paperwork, and short walks inside the inner garden where the walls felt protective instead of trapping. Sundays became grocery day. Dominic brought bags, then left them on the counter like offerings to normal life. I watched Dominic struggle with a stroller latch once, and it was the first time I saw him look genuinely uncertain, and it made him feel safer. The case against Trent stayed in the background like thunder beyond the horizon. Updates came through Janine in short, controlled summaries, and Dominic's team kept the boundaries firm. I didn't chase every detail anymore. I focused on what I could touch: my baby's warm cheek, Harper's laugh, my own breath coming easier. Some nights I still woke convinced I heard my real name in the hall. Then I would hear only the house settling, and I would fall back asleep faster than before. One evening I sat at the desk in my room with a budget sheet and a list of apartments in Evanston. I circled numbers, measured daycare costs, and pictured walking to class with my baby in a carrier. Outside, the estate lights swept the lawn in slow arcs, steady and protective. Inside, my fear shifted into something new, a cautious determination. I didn't know when relief would arrive for real. I only knew I was aiming for a day that felt ordinary, like a Tuesday. Months moved in small scenes: 7:15 mornings, Harper's shoes by the door, and my newborn's sighs like tiny punctuation. The Mercer estate stopped feeling like a hiding place and started feeling like a bridge I could cross at my own pace. I studied at the kitchen table while Mrs. Baird pretended not to supervise, flashcards beside bottles and burp cloths. Some days I caught myself waiting for relief, then realizing I didn't even know what relief was supposed to feel like. I just kept stacking ordinary moments until they held my weight. That was my kind of courage, quietly practiced. Even with routine, the case hovered like weather. Unknown numbers made my stomach drop before I reminded myself that Janine handled calls, not me. Official envelopes arrived at the estate, and my hands still trembled opening them, as if paper could explode. Updates were short and controlled. Court dates scheduled, motions filed, on no-contact boundaries renewed. I learned to read Dominic's face when he came back from meetings. The calmer he looked, the more serious the work had been. Sometimes I wondered if I would ever stop flinching at footsteps, or if healing simply meant flinching less often in my bones. On sentencing day, I watched through a secure video room at the prosecutor's office, an advocate seated beside me, my baby sleeping in a carrier against my chest. I kept my eyes on the screen only as long as I had to. The judge affirmed the pattern: stalking across state lines, harassment, assault, and repeated intimidation. Trent received an 8-year prison sentence, plus strict no-contact orders that didn't expire with my tears. I thought I would feel victorious. Instead, I felt hollow. He, like my body, finally set down a heavy bag and discovered numb hands after all that carrying. Dominic didn't celebrate, and that helped me trust the outcome. He treated the sentence like a lock clicking shut, not a trophy. Later, when my exhaustion turned into quiet tears, he stayed close without taking over, letting me feel what I felt. His steadiness carried a simple idea: relief doesn't arrive like fireworks. It arrives later, disguised as a normal morning when you realize you aren't scanning for danger first. I didn't understand it yet, but I held on to it the way I held my baby. Careful, protective, real. For once, someone strong allowed me to be small, safely right then. Sundays became our soft ritual. Dominic showed up with grocery bags, and then fixed whatever the apartment listings called minor issues in the estate guest suite: a sticky drawer, a loose hinge, a nightlight that flickered. Harper tested him with messy honesty, offering him pretzels and then demanding he open them faster. My baby Josie learned his voice as background, not as a threat. I watched trust form the way bread rises, slow, warm, powered by consistency. No speeches, no grand gestures, just showing up again and again. Each week I felt my shoulders drop sooner, as if time itself believed us. When Josie was 6 months old, I signed a lease in Evanston for a modest 2-bedroom near a bus line and a quiet park. The rent was $1,200, and I wrote it into my budget like a promise I intended to keep. Harper started daycare 3 mornings a week, clutching her bunny, then running back to kiss my cheek like she owned the schedule. I began my accounting certificate, evenings and weekends, and took a part-time clerical job that didn't ask too many questions. Independence felt scary, but it also felt clean. I paid Dominic back in transfers, on time. Dominic never treated my apartment like his territory. He came on Sundays if I wanted help, and stayed away when I needed space. When the first loan payment cleared, he didn't comment. He simply filed the receipt like it mattered that I kept my word. The original tuition support was $5,000, and paying it back became a private act of dignity. He still handled the quiet background threats through Janine and Reese, but he never used them to keep me close. He showed up as a constant, not a claim. That distinction taught me what love looks like after fear. Key triggers didn't vanish. They thinned. A slammed car door still made my pulse jump, but it settled faster now. An unknown email still tightened my throat, but I could breathe through it and keep cooking. Harper stopped asking why we checked locks. She started asking what we'd make for dinner. Josie learned to clap at the sound of running water, delighted by nothing important. I began to recognize the real win. Not perfect calm, but the ability to return to myself without a fight every time. In shift, I stopped measuring days by danger and started measuring them by living. One Tuesday, nothing happened. Morning light spilled across my counter, and the radiator clicked like it always had. I brewed coffee and realized my hands were steady. No scanning the parking lot first. No checking my phone for threats before tasting the bitterness I actually liked. Harper argued about socks while Josie babbled in her high chair, and the noise sounded like life, not warning. Outside, a bus sighed to a stop, then moved on. I stood there, holding a mug, and understood. Healing feels ordinary, and that is how you know it is real. And I let it stay. I won't pretend the past disappeared. It just stopped steering the wheel. Dominic remains in our story like a lighthouse on the edge of a rough lake, present, steady, not demanding I live on his shore. My kids are growing inside a life built from routines, paperwork, and soft Sundays. If you've ever rebuilt after fear, I hope this reminds you that survival can turn into peace. One ordinary day at a time. If my story hit you, please tap like, share it with someone who needs hope, and tell me in the comments what your Tuesday looks like right now.